Hello, everyone. This is the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley. You have made it all the way to our program this week, and we are very excited to have you as a part of a very important discussion that we're about to engage in. And we are joined by two members of our club. At the bottom, you can see Alan, wave at us, treasurer of the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley, and not waving at the moment, but a good guy nonetheless. And then Martin Fox, our service chair, who is waving, good man. And very nice. And our speaker, Carol Metzker. And you want to know about Carol, that she is a writer, a speaker, and the author of a book called Facing the Monster: How One Person Can Fight Against Child Slavery. Can fight child slavery. Thank you very much. She is a Rotarian and a recipient of the very prestigious Rotary International Service Above Self Award. We also have with us Heather Shaw. Heather is a member of our club and joining for her first recording. Way to go, Heather! All right, wave. And what we're going to do next is Heather and Martin and Alan and I will all mute our microphones and cameras, and I am going to hand the floor over to Carol for the program. So, Carol, it is all yours.
Hi, everyone. Great to see you all. Thanks for inviting me to talk with you, and especially to face this one of the more hopeful, I think, subjects, simply because there's so much we can do.
Hey, Carol, if you would, if you just kind of start into that message again, we had a mild freeze right as you were getting started. So just you can leave it where it is with the slides, but go ahead and let us know that.
Okay, you all with me now?
You're good.
Okay, Rushton, you with me?
You're good to go.
Great. In case some of you missed what I just said, thanks so much for addressing this subject. It's an ugly subject. Few people say, wahoo, Carol is going to talk with us about the injustice and criminal behavior of human trafficking. But it's important. It's here. We need to address it, and there's a lot that we can do to change this issue for millions of people. I'll begin by sharing a story with you, and that is when I first began talking, especially to Rotarians in my own neighborhood, I would give a speech, and there would always be someone who came up to me at the very end, and their question would be, Carol, you don't mean this is here. You don't mean human trafficking really exists right here in our state, in our neighborhood, do you? And I'd have to say, yes. That's what I meant. That's what I mean. Human trafficking is right here. They always knew that it was somewhere else. They knew that it was in Asia, India, Thailand, Nepal, but it was news that it's right here among us. I was in Nepal last year looking at various facilities for survivors of human trafficking, taking a look at some of the things that they're doing, and speaking to Rotarians in Kathmandu about the issue of human trafficking and modern slavery. At the very end of one of my presentations, a Rotarian said to me, now, Carol, we understand that human trafficking, modern slavery, is a problem in the U.S., but you don't mean it's here in Kathmandu, do you? I said yes. It was then that I realized that no one wants to think of this problem, this heinous, heinous situation occurring in their beautiful home and community. But the sooner we do, the sooner we believe that and begin to look for it, the sooner we'll see and we can face it. Here's the world map of slavery. This is as of December 2014. You can see that it exists everywhere with the possible exception of Greenland, where there simply isn't data. The darker the color, the more vivid the red and the orange, the greater number of slaves, the lighter the color, such as in the U.S., where many of us are watching today. The lighter the color, the fewer the slaves, but that doesn't mean we don't have any. In fact, there are 35.8 million people enslaved worldwide, and many are children. Here is my thought as Rotary particularly moves forward. Rotary hasn't freed children from polio only to see them enslaved. Here's the good news. Rotarians are doing wonderful, wonderful things against this blot, and you can help. You can join us. There are three main areas that you can start working on with us. One is to join RACSRAG, the Rotarian Action Group Against Child Slavery. The second is to work on projects. Maybe you're already working on projects that keep people from being vulnerable to traffickers. Maybe you can start working with projects for survivors. And something new that I'll tell you a little bit more about with all three of these, with a campaign called Rotarians Aren't Buying It. So let's go back to the first. The Rotarian Action Group Against Child Slavery is now an official action group of Rotary International. We operated as a provisional group for about 3 years. And what they do is work against child slavery, particularly raising awareness, but more importantly, working on projects. You can join RACSRAG by going to www.racsrag.org, and whether or not you are a member, I hope you'll become a member, but you can help us with various solutions, raising awareness, and those all-important projects. Let me give you an example of one of the solutions that recently occurred. Last week, or I guess by the time this is aired, it'll be May 11th and May 12th, I attended the World Summit on Ending Human Trafficking and Commercial Sexual Exploitation. It was an invitation summit. It was sponsored by the Carter Center and the Rotarian Action Group Against Child Slavery. You may recognize two of our speakers on the right part of your screen, our President-elect, Ravi Ravindran, and former U.S. President Jimmy Carter. You'll see a group of Rotarians on the left, those of us who are attending the conference. And what our job as Rotarians and what 200 other attendees did at that conference, besides listening, sharing, talking, expertise, expanding our knowledge, was to devise a 10-year plan to end human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation, which is a type of trafficking or modern slavery, in 10 years, by 2025. That plan was indeed presented to former President Jimmy Carter at the end of the conference. So look for great things coming out of Rotary and that conference. RACSRAG, or the Rotarian Action Group Against Child Slavery, also provides a lot of help for survivors. You can join this through hands-on service and philanthropy. You can work on projects locally and globally. Here are just a couple of examples. For the last 4 years, I have volunteered at a center near my home in Pennsylvania. It is a residence for female survivors of human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. I do simple things with them really for the purpose of learning how to build friendships and develop healthy relationships and freedom. But sometimes I do something so simple as teach a group of women how to make soup, because when you're trafficked, you don't go grocery shopping, you don't cook, you don't do anything but what your trafficker, or sometimes called a pimp, tells you that you may do. There's a wonderful project that we did through the Rotarian Action Group, particularly recreated and led by my club, and that was a lot of international philanthropy. At the organization called Punarnawa Ashram, which means literally new beginnings, and a center, which is a rehabilitation center for girls ages 7 to 18 rescued from sex slavery in India, we put in a biogas system. I loved this project because it was sustainable. It just keeps on going, and it now pays for itself, which is the aim of all of our projects. So here's how, very briefly, how this works. You start with the cow. What does a cow give us? Milk and Cow poop. We put in this biogas system. In the very back, you'll see sort of a round sort of storage tank. Maybe it looks to be about 3 feet high. That is a storage unit where all sorts of good stuff, gross stuff, if you'd like to call it that, is added to the system. And you'll see a pipe sort of in front of that coming from the ground. In the picture on the far right, you'll see a young woman who has put cow poop and cow urine into that container. She's mixing it a little bit with a stick, and then she's going to use that handle to crank all that, to mix it. All that gooey, disgusting mixture, which is actually pretty wonderful, is going to flow down the hole into an underground digester. In that underground digester, what happens is the methane rises to the top and goes out, up and out of that digester into a pipe that leads to a kitchen where you'll see a woman is cooking food. The methane goes to their stove and fuels that, so they no longer have to buy methane tanks. They've now got a sustainable way of cooking. Girls can also learn to cook, and they also learn animal husbandry, by the way. All the sludge, that I call it sludge, it's not true sludge, but all that, the gooey glop that is left after the methane has been leached out, goes to a big a field next to it. It's that big, but that stuff is gathered, and that becomes the fertilizer for their crops. You can see the yellow lentils that feed both cows and humans there in that next picture. And finally, of course, cows also produce milk, and you'll see the milkman here. One day when I was at the center, he was pouring the leftover milk that isn't used at the center into these big metal containers on the back of his bicycle, and he rides off to the market on his bike. He sells that milk so that not only the milkman gets more income, but the center gets more income. Loved this project. So here's one that is currently being developed, and I'm hoping your club or Rotarians will help. It's called A School for Freedom, and it provides sustainable freedom for a village of 100 people in India. It all starts with a school, because remember that people who are enslaved typically are vulnerable. They may be illiterate. They may be in slavery for so many generations that they might not even recognize that they have the right to be free. It costs almost $36,000 for a 3-year process of kids' education, lunches, building a school, teaching women in particular vocational skills so that they can generate an income, and they also teach them that they have the right to be free. If you divide this out, it's basically $360 per freed person, and it's sustainable because future generations will be free, and because they are now literate and because they have an income, they have the ability to stay free rather than being vulnerable to traffickers. The last one, Rotarians aren't buying it. 2 things we can do. One is switch from unfairly traded to fairly traded goods. The second is to become part of a campaign that says we will no longer tolerate buying sex. Here are 2 examples of fairly traded goods. Tea, you'll see on the tea bag cover, you'll see Equal Exchange brand. It's fairly trade certified. Divine Chocolate. There are all sorts of companies now offering fair trade chocolate, tea, coffee, something we all love first thing in the morning. I encourage all of you to start asking your shops nearby, if you don't know about fair trade products, what are they selling? If we buy, they'll provide us those products. Finally, sex. Not everyone buys sex, but they say about 10% of the population does. I'll leave it with this. You've got, Rushton is going to show us a film in just a moment, a very short film. But here is, among my hand and the hand of another, excuse me, I'm not another survivor. I'm not a survivor. I was not a victim. But the hand of a victim. Here's what she said, and it's so true. You didn't know that I was forced, but instead of having sex with me, you could have made a difference in my life. Would you do that to your daughter? Last quick story, and it's about generosity in action. Let's let our generosity run rampant the way a woman did I met several months ago. The first day I volunteered at a center called New Day, which is for women who are currently being sex trafficked. I helped women with meals, finding clothing that they need, all sorts of things. They needed a shower. Some of them simply wanted a place to rest. One woman came in and asked if we had socks. Unfortunately, that was the one thing we did not have that day. One of the other victims, who was simply resting for a few minutes, bent down, untied her shoelaces, and offered the socks to the other victim, offered the socks off her feet. It taught me a lot about generosity that day, and I hope you'll think about this too anytime we as Rotarians are asked to give whatever resources we may have. So I'm going to say thanks for listening, thanks for facing and fighting the monster. I'm looking forward to answering questions after Rushton cues up a film for us. Thanks so much, everyone.
Nicely done. Thank you very much, Carol. Now, we're talking about the Amsterdam video, right?
Yes, we are.
All right, let me get that set up. Give me just a second. And here we go. Powerful video.
It is. This is what happens to the women I work with. No one asks to have sex. A lot of times it is with torture involved. No one asks for that 15 to 30 times a day, 365 days a year, sometimes as long as 10 years. This is why I do what I do.
Well, the work is so very important, and I'm really glad that we have the opportunity to understand that this is something that Rotarians have come together to make a larger, more concerted effort through the Rotarian action groups. Last week we had a program on what action groups are, so this is a wonderful opportunity to see the power of the idea all the more potently with such a disturbing topic, for sure. Now, as we go ahead, I want to make sure that our panel, we'll call us, Martin and Alan and Heather, have the chance to make comments and ask questions as well. Folks, as you want to kind of come in with a comment or a question, feel free to unmute your microphone and your camera. We can do that. Carol, now, when you've been doing this in Pennsylvania, I mean, just the message that you started with, it's always somewhere else, right? You know, that my guess is that that's something that you've kind of encountered again and again and again as you've traveled all over the place to talk about this.
It is, and I finally come to the conclusion that it's, first of all, human trafficking, modern slavery is, for the most part, invisible. No one's going to come up to us because it's illegal in every single nation of the world, despite the fact that it exists in every nation of the world. So there are going to be very few slave holders. Notice I don't use the word slave owners, but there are very few slave holders who are going to come up to me and say, "Hey, Carol, I hold 12 people. It's against the law." The other thing is so it's invisible. They're going to hide, or they're going to make it look like something else. They're going to ask women who are being forced to have sex to make it look like they're the ones who want to do this. They're going to blame drugs or something else. It's hard for us to realize that it is here.
Well, you know, one of the things as a teacher, one of the things that I've tried to do with my students is try to help them understand that the images that they might run across when they're doing searches for other things or something like that, you know, those images tell a story, right? And you know, I had moments, for example, when a student, you know, searched on something fairly innocuous, and up pops a picture of someone, let's just say, scantily clad.
Yes.
And you know, they're, oh, you know, and I say, all right, wait, you know, I understand that you weren't looking for that image for that reason, but do you know why it's a problem for us? Oh, well, it's not allowed. Do you know why it's not allowed? You know, do you understand that why in the school we don't think that there's anything, you know, do you understand? And typically, you know, they'll say no, because no one really has talked to them about this. And I'll say, look, that person in that picture, it's a person, right? Someone's daughter. It's a real person. And when that picture was put out that way, the idea was to treat that person as something other than a person, right? And you think about, you know, the people that you know, your friends, your sisters, you know, brothers, you know, I mean, there's just all kinds of sorry situations out there. The kids need people to talk to them about what it means to look at others honorably. And I'm curious to know if a part of what's going on with RaxRag is educational programs that teachers can take to schools. Is that a part of the effort so far?
The Rotarian Action Group does not have particular programs for kids, but we don't need to, because there are so many other organizations.
So we just had a little bit of go ahead.
I'm sorry, at polarisproject.org. The organization is called Polaris, out of Washington, D.C. They offer everything from law enforcement training to, you know, teachers, educational curriculum.
Good deal. And if you would include that link just in an email, I'll make sure that when the folks who are watching this program at the moment are finished, they'll be able to follow that link among the other links that you provide. So,
we'll do. Yeah, we'll do. Could I also say something that I thought you said that was really, really important? Really important. Images tell a story, and you talked about working with the young people in our communities and larger society. The average age of a girl who enters formal prostitution, which is sex trafficking. A 13-year-old can't, you know, consent to sex, so she can't be a prostitute. But the average age of a girl entering formal prostitution is 13 years old. 13. The average age of a boy who first looks at pornography is also 13 years old. And today, while some of us are so naive, perhaps, and you know, this pornography is not what we do, you know, or would even consider, it's not Playboy. It's not even Hustler anymore. It is unbelievably graphic torture. It is pornography is prostitution and torture with the camera going. It's not just hurting these 13-year-old girls, or all ages. It's even hurting the boys who are looking at this. Can you imagine being a 13-year-old boy? You love your mother, your sister, your friends, and all of a sudden you look at some of these images that very clearly state at the bottom, this is what a real man does. Can you imagine the confusion, the shame, what's happening? It also impacts boys. This is not just a female problem. It involves everyone. So thank you for talking about that.
Absolutely, and that it happens on a scale beyond the individual as well, right? Because I think you just conveyed very, very powerfully what happens on an individual level. I read a perhaps the most disturbing thing I've ever read in a Wired article last year about the people who there are places where people are hired to essentially watch tons and tons and tons of videos that have been uploaded to, say, Facebook or YouTube and other sites. And the idea is to try to find the things that just need to be taken down right away, right? Mm-hmm. And in addition to the horrific things that make it into these videos, there's just kind of this sense of what does this do to someone who watches the very worst side of humanity, right? For hours a day, several days a week, and apparently people come into a job like this because they need a job, right? They start reviewing these things, and within a few weeks or months, it's just like I can't handle it, because the violence, beheadings, all just terrible, terrible stuff. And it speaks to the need for people like Rotarians who will essentially stop and say, all right, we're not going to ignore that. We're going to put our energy and our time and our voices into a place where it can be heard and hopefully acted upon. So it's exciting to see what you guys have done with the Carter Center. I'm curious to know, did you approach them? How did you connect with them?
I am a member of, you mean me personally? I am a member of the Rotarian Action Group Against Child Slavery, and as author of the Facing the Monster, How One Person Can Fight Child Slavery, I received an invitation. Some of the members of RAXRAG are in Georgia, and they have great links to the Carter Center, which is how that happened. Let me address something that you said that was also very important, and that is people who are watching, good people who are helping, also have to watch out for what you described as this horrendous impact of watching brutal violence. They can suffer from something called reflective or secondary trauma. I loved what you said about Rotarians making a difference. Anything that we can do to prevent the next victim, to stop the next tragedy from occurring, is going to help prevent not just another victim from feeling the trauma, but it's going to help all the people who help these victims or people who must watch. It's going to prevent secondary trauma also.
Agreed. I mean, I think that when you look at a problem on a scale like this, I believe one of the figures I saw in some of the material that I read on the website had, there are researchers who've estimated that there are more slaves in the world today than were trafficked from Africa over 400 years of the slave trade. Now,
I even heard that it was more slaves than any other time in history, maybe even put together.
And I mean, that is not to diminish the awful, kind of nature of the slave trade or anything like that. I mean, in many ways, it simply recognizes the kind of population, issues we have right now. But what we do in trying to make sure that there is hope for people, right? In communities where people have access to jobs and can take care of their families, and kids can get educated, and have some reasonable hope for the future. I mean, it's harder for these things to happen, right? I mean, I would assume that traffickers prey on poverty, something fierce. Is that right?
Yes, they do. Anything that makes a person vulnerable, whether it's poverty, illiteracy, racism, mental illness, homelessness, anything can do that. By the way, when you talked about jobs, access to education, um, all these good things, hope, which Rotarians do so well. These were all part of the 10-year plan with very specific objectives next to them, but these are all part of that 10-year plan. So if you've come across those ideas, we're taking you to the summit next year.
Sounds good. Well, let's do this. We've talked about several things in the last few minutes that are going to be really important items for our those viewing this program to follow up on if they're interested. So let's make sure that you and I work together to get those links together and get them in that meeting, so that those who finish watching this can just scroll down a bit and be like, there they are, right? One last quick comment. The chances are very good that this program will happen the week that includes Juneteenth. Do you want to speak to that real quick?
Sure. Juneteenth is the date back in what we now call the date back in the 1800s, I believe June 19th, 1865, when soldiers first enforced Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. So how very fitting that this program will run that particular week. We're still working on that notion of freedom for all, and it's great that we can do it not just Juneteenth, but every day of the year.
Awesome. And with that, let me wind our recording down. I want to thank everybody for being part of this, Alan and Martin and Heather, and also to ask our viewers this week. You know, you've heard some amazing ideas, just very important kind of topics. You know, that sense that we're capable of making a difference with these things as well. Add your thoughts to the discussion below. So as you scroll down in one of our meetings, you see the comments area, and you can reply to other people's comments. We want to have that kind of discussion happen. It's our chance not only to engage in ideas, but to get to know each other better as well. So with that, I will remind all of our members and guests, make very sure that you do the I attended survey at the bottom. That allows us to know you were here, right? And keep a close eye on all of the happenings that are going on with email and within our meetings about different projects and opportunities to get together that our club has going. We thank you very much for taking part. Thank you again, Carol. And with that, we will look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.